This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys Network. Here's your host, Will Hill.
Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast, presented by Goal Boys. Coming up on the show, FranchiseKF, college football handicapper, will join us. We will discuss all of the big games, get his thoughts on the ranked games, which we have a few of. Some of the other games he thinks have good value. I'll get to my picks here in a minute. It is a big college football Labor Day weekend, so excited to talk to franchise. But before we get to that, the AL races are so fascinating right now, and I'll start with the AL East, and I'll sort of reiterate what I said. I think it was on Sunday, where if you froze time on Friday night a week ago, Yankees had just beaten the Rockies. Orioles were struggling as Joe Namath would say, and about to lose to the Astros, it looked like, and it was about to be 3 in the loss column, and not just 3 in the loss column, which is a big lead for these two teams, considering how close it's been all summer. The Orioles had their next 5 games against the Astros and against the Dodgers, and the Yankees, meanwhile, had the Rockies and the Nationals for the next 5, and the Yankees were starting to play better, just finished up a couple good games against Cleveland, beat the Rockies, pitching was starting to look better. Stanton back, all these things that made you optimistic. Well, Orioles came back to beat Houston that Friday night. And then the next day, we're down late again to Houston, came back and rallied. Meanwhile, the Yankees lost that day game to Colorado, and Yankees have really squandered an opportunity. We talked about it, end of July, all August. Hey, Yankees have a soft schedule. And it's weird. Boy, it's a weird Yankee team. It's a weird Yankee season just in general, a weird season just in general in baseball with no dominant team, and these teams so up and down. Yankees have been pretty damn good against these upper echelon teams, Astros and Phillies. They've done well against the good teams. They have not played well, and they have missed their opportunity, really squandered an opportunity to put this division away. Now it's going to be a dogfight. As we're recording this, Orioles about to play the Dodgers. 1 game separates these teams. Yankees lost 2 out of 3 to the Nationals, lost a game to the Rockies, lost a game to the White Sox, lost 2 out of 3 at home to the Angels. So they have really taken an opportunity to stretch this out to 3, 4, 5 games. And we are sitting here, and I think it's just going to come down to the wire. Keep in mind, and I hate this about baseball, keep in mind now, we don't have the tiebreaker games. We don't have game 163. So if these teams are tied right now, it comes down to head-to-head, and there's only 3 games left. Baltimore leads 6-4. And remember, Yankees blew that awful game that Sunday afternoon to the Orioles right before the All-Star break. Otherwise it'd be 5-5, and it'd still be up in the air. Unless the Yankees sweep the Orioles, and they play September 24th, 25th, and 26th at Yankee Stadium. Unless the Yankees sweep that series, Orioles are going to have the tiebreaker. So if you're the Yankees, tie's not going to be good enough. You're going to have to win this division and win it outright, because you're going to lose the tie in all likelihood. And look, if you win the tiebreaker, that means you swept the Orioles. And if you sweep the Orioles, you're probably going to win the division. So fascinating race. Yankees are just, boy, what a strange team. What a strange season. It's hard to get a grip on them. Every time you think they're going in the wrong direction, they play well. Every time you start to feel good about them, they lose a couple games like they lost to the Nationals. It's just a very strange year. It's a very hard team to figure out, and it's a weird year in baseball. So that's the AL East. AL Central is fascinating too, because the Guardians have led this thing wire to wire, and the Royals, who only won 56 games last year, not only won 56 games, they had to rally to win 56 games. They were like 40 and 100 and something at one point. They were awful last year. They had a chance to take the lead against Cleveland. They had a 4-game series, swept the doubleheader Monday, beat them Tuesday, and were about to beat them Wednesday. They're up 5-2 in the bottom of the 7th. Cleveland erupts, wins the game. So maybe that springboards Cleveland. That's a wide open division now between Cleveland and I think Kansas City. I don't know that Minnesota is going to win it. It's funny, I talked about Kansas City. It was like a week ago, maybe less than that. Had to be a week ago, where these teams were all bunched up, and I thought Kansas City at plus 450 was the best value. Of course, I didn't bet it because I'm an idiot, but hopefully somebody out there bet that, because that's a good number, and that was a good number. So that's going to be a fascinating race. And then in the West, as I'll read these prices from DraftKings in terms of the division as play starts Thursday. The West, who I penciled Houston in. Seattle was playing terrible. Seattle fired its manager. It got to like 6 or 7 on the plus side for Houston over Seattle. Meanwhile, Seattle had a 10-game lead in June. You just figure it's going to be Houston's division, and it probably is, but that's down entering play Thursday. That's down to 4, and Seattle has the Angels this weekend. So maybe the Mariners with that pitching can get hot and make a run. As I pull up the standings here, AL Central, Guardians minus 135, Royals plus 200, Twins plus 425, AL East, Yankees minus 160, Orioles plus 115, and then in the West, Astros minus 700, Mariners 5-1. It's like 250-1 on the Rangers. So they can't quite there's just not enough time left. They can't quite get on track. Every time you think they make a run too, they're one of these teams where they just take a step backwards. And DeGrom looks like he might be back at some point. He's starting rehab assignments, but just not enough time for Texas. So that's the American League, and we'll get to franchise here in a minute. But my college football picks, some of the games I like are the uglier ones. I think getting 3 touchdowns, 21 points with Fresno State is a lot. If you shop around, maybe get the 21.5. Again, I'm taping this Thursday, so if anything moves, it's the way it is. But shop around. If you can get 21, we'll call it 21 with Fresno State against Michigan. I just don't know. I know Michigan's going to be good defensively. I just don't know if Michigan can pull away on offense with all of the guys they lost, offensive line, quarterback. It's a whole new offense. I think that could look a little bit rickety for Michigan on offense. And remember, they have Texas next week, which is a big game for them. So do they really want to show a lot if they have a big lead in the second half? If they're up 10 or 14, do they just run the ball and get out of there and they're not worried about style points? And Fresno State's a half decent team. So I like getting the 3 touchdowns there. And Georgia State plus 21 against Georgia Tech. A couple of 3 touchdown underdogs here. I like Georgia State. Georgia Tech is coming back from Ireland. Big win. Time difference they have to adjust to here. And I just think there's a lot of things where you can figure, hey, maybe there's a little bit of a letdown. They're reacclimating to being back in the U.S. Maybe they take Georgia State lightly, and Georgia State can hang within a big number here at 21. That was a good performance by Georgia Tech, but it's only one game. And, it's counterintuitive, but historically, teams that have not played versus teams that have played, the teams that haven't played actually do better, which you wouldn't think. You would think the team that has a game under their belt is in better shape just because, they've worked the kinks out. They've got some experience. They got their feet wet, but that's not the case. I guess the team that hasn't played does well because I guess it's just more valuable having film on your opponent where, hey, if you're Georgia State, if you're any of these teams that haven't played and you're playing a team that has played, hey, I got film on you. I know what you're doing. I know what you like to run. Meanwhile, you have no film on me. So that's one that's sort of counterintuitive, but I guess when you think it through, it does make some sense that the team that hasn't played does well when they play teams with a game under their belt. So fun college football weekend. Miami, Florida is a fascinating game. Both those programs who were at the peak of college football for a long time. It's been hard time since, and both those programs looking to get back on track. And both of them, well, boy, a loss would just be, I don't say a disaster, but there's a lot of tension there. Both coaches under some pressure to win. That's a good game. It's a fun game. Notre Dame A&M is fun. And that's another one I should mention. I like the Notre Dame team total under here with FranchiseKF is going to get to it too. And I think he's along the same lines as he sends over his notes and I'm reading them. Notre Dame is starting a lot of freshmen and sophomore up front. Elko, the coach for A&M, coached Riley Leonard, the Notre Dame quarterback last year. And anytime Notre Dame steps up against these SEC teams, it just doesn't seem to go well for them. So under 21.5, Notre Dame team totals a play for me. And I just think the coach versus the quarterback, when the quarterback has played under a certain coach, now he has to play against them. I think back to like Bill Belichick and Drew Bledsoe, when Bledsoe went from the Patriots to the Bills, and he used to go into Foxborough, and he could not move the ball at all. And just, especially when you have a defensive coach who knows his former player, who coached his former player, now he's coaching against him. I think that's a big angle. So Notre Dame team total under to go along with Georgia State and along with Fresno State. We'll see what FranchiseKF thinks about some of these bigger games. Georgia, Clemson, the big game. I would lean towards Clemson. We'll see. They've certainly fallen off in past years, but boy, it is strange to see Clemson, just a national powerhouse for 4 or 5 years, getting almost 2 touchdowns. So it's good. It got here quickly, as much as you talked about, hey, when is football going to be here? It does feel like it got here quickly, but it is here because once you get past Labor Day weekend, you go right into the Thursday night game, Chiefs and Ravens, a few days away by the time you listen to this, and then football is back. And it gets here quickly, but you got to enjoy it because it goes quickly too. Sometimes, you're so excited for it to be back, and you're doing your fantasy drafts, and you look up and you're like week 8, week 9. It takes, sometimes it takes a long time to get here. Although this year it felt like it came quickly, but it does go by quickly too. So you have to enjoy it. So excited for football to be back. Excited to talk to FranchiseKF. That is next. This is Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. College football is here. It is back. I got a little taste of it with week 0 last week, but it is in full swing here. Week 1, we got some good games, and to break them all down, you can catch him on Twitter, FranchiseKF. He joins us now, a very sharp college football handicapper. What's up, man? Thanks for coming on. Are you excited?
I'm very excited. It felt good to get a taste of things in week 0, and I'm excited to get a full menu this week.
Going from week 0 to week 1, let's just look back at week 0 for a second. And this is always tough, NFL, college football, whatever. Just that line between a reaction and an overreaction. I know books, I've talked to, guys that make the lines too, and they have a hard time. I mean, it's hard for everybody saying, hey, this is one data point, but it's also 100% of the data we have. So you don't want to ignore it, but you don't want to overreact. What are just some of your takeaways from week 0? I guess Florida State, SMU, is that going to be as bad as it looked last week?
This is interesting. I don't know if you saw the clip that Josh Pate put out. I believe it was yesterday, and he specifically was talking about Florida State, and I think it's kind of a macro point that he made, but I think we all recognize that the local beats have kind of diminished in terms of the manpower put into them. And I think that there is also an element right now, kind of culturally, where you have to maybe play nice if you're in certain sects of the media, if you want to get access to coaches. And so he brought up this point about, everything we heard out of Florida State's camp was this is this dominant team in the trenches. You could look at what they were losing, but also returning with some portal guys and the experience on the line, and feel really good about things. And that seemed to be the message coming out of camp. I believed it was going to be, and that was certainly far from the case. And I don't know whether that's something that's extremely fixable. I mean, there were some pretty significant issues with them. So I do have some questions with Florida State, because I think Jordan Travis was an extremely underrated college quarterback. And I think now in his 5th year, we kind of know who DJ Ungalele is now. And I don't know that he's a difference maker. So I do have some concerns about Florida State, because they're built to be a trench team. SMU as well. I do think that both games had a little bit of weather conditions, which I think could attribute some of the slow starts, if you will, to both of those teams. I think that in terms of SMU, they looked bad, but I actually was a lot more impressed by Nevada. I think that was sort of my takeaway, that they look like a significantly improved team, and really a testament to, if you can turn over a roster, if you can have some portal guys hit and bring in a new coach that builds a culture. I came away actually more impressed with Nevada than I was very negative on SMU.
Yeah, and look, all the underdogs cover in week 1. It's only 4 games, but do you think that is not coincidental with the fact that, hey, there's so much turnover with transfer portal, NIL, that it's hard to price these teams, and when in doubt, just sort of take the points with these teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair thing to bring up. I think that the variance right now with the transfer portal creates an opportunity for rosters that weren't necessarily that good to hire the right guy and bring in some difference makers, and that can certainly change things. I have quite a few favorites already on my card. I usually start spraying months and months ago into week 1, for better or for worse. So week 1 has at least caused me to look at a few of what I've taken and have a few questions. I'll say that. So I'm not necessarily ready to write anything in stone, but it's at least given me a little bit more cause for pause than I would like at this point.
All right, let's get into some of the games for week 1, because we have good games, fun games. I'll start Miami, Florida. This has bounced around a key number. As we're recording this, Miami minus 2.5. I'm sure you could find a 3 somewhere, but this has been kind of a tug of war where every time it gets a 3.5, it gets bet back down, and vice versa. So look, a lot on the line. Both these coaches, whoever loses this game, I feel like is going to be feeling the pressure. So fun game, good game. What are you looking here, Miami and Florida?
I actually took I took Miami. I think I laid 2 with them. I just think that they're the better team. I think that in particular, one of the advantages that they're going to have is going to be in the trenches. I think both teams have quarterbacks they can count on. They have skill talent. That's something that both teams share. Obviously, going to be a difficult environment going into Florida. Don't think you're going to have to worry about the heat, obviously, with Miami, as you do sometimes when you maybe have a Boise coming down to Statesboro, for example. It's going to be a little bit different. I think that Miami is going to be a really strong trench team. They're a team that kind of reminds me a little bit of like an Ole Miss or a Tennessee, where they have a lot of fun offensive pieces in recent years, but they kind of let you down a little bit in the trenches. And I think that they're all three of those teams that I mentioned are teams that I think have really improved in the trenches. And I think it's something where Miami's defensive line, I think, has, unlike Florida State's, who may be somewhat of a paper tiger, I actually think that they have legit potential to kind of muddy things up for Florida. So I took them at the short number there.
How about Georgia Clemson? Georgia laying anywhere 13.5, 14, again, right around a key number. What are you looking for in this game?
Yeah, I've actually looked at this one a little bit. I haven't played anything. I would kind of be a little bit correlated where I would be looking to potentially back Clemson, especially if I could get like a 14 and a half. I've just kind of been watching it and being patient, as well as an under there. Was kind of looking for a little bit of upward mobility on both of those numbers before I did anything. I think that it's one of those things that defensively, I think that they're going to be able to hang. I have questions about their offense. I mean, I think they were so hit and miss last year. I still don't know that they have the quarterback situation solved, which is going to be a tough ask. Something that's really interesting that you're not accustomed to seeing at Georgia is they've just had, between suspensions and injuries and other things, they're really thin at tailback. And I think that is something that normally I don't, equate a ton of points to running backs, especially at a place like Georgia where you'd expect they'd be so deep, but they're really having some attrition there in this week one at least. And I think it just puts a little bit more pressure on Carson Beck, who I think is equipped to handle it. But if they really can't get the run game going and they're a little bit one-dimensional, I think it kind of takes some of their firepower away and makes them a bit more predictable. So not one I've gotten involved in. I do think that it probably won't be as ugly as it was, if you remember, a few years ago, that game that made all our eyes bleed. But I'd lean dog and under there.
What was that, 3 years ago? Was that 2021? These years sort of meshed together. And I think it was like a 10-6 game, and the one defensive, the one score on was defensive, if I'm remembering it correctly. It was an ugly game.
So I think it could be I think it will be ugly, but not that ugly.
Notre Dame, Texas A&M. As we're recording this, A&M a 3-point favorite. A&M's got bet. If you're betting A&M, hey, I'm not saying don't bet it, but you're a little bit late to the party here. Notre Dame with the offensive line injury. There's some thought that it's a tough matchup for them. Have you done anything with this game? What's your handicap here on Notre Dame A&M?
Well, I actually was early to the party. I actually have A&M as a small underdog in this one, so I was really early there. That was one that was good that I got in early. Line really started running. Obviously, you mentioned some offensive line concerns that I think are very legitimate. I think that in this game, Notre Dame is going to be looking at either I think it's 3 sophomores and 2 freshmen, or that could be flipped. They're looking at a total of 6 cumulative combined starts for their entire offensive line in this game. And I think if you look at Texas A&M, one area where they have consistently spent money from NIL purposes is they've got a multi-million-dollar defensive line. They have a defensive coach in Mike Elko who's coming in. I think this is going to be a really, really tough ask. Riley Leonard, the quarterback from Duke, who I actually really do like, they brought in some familiarity, of course, here in place with Mike Elko, who was his head coach. I tend to lean that is advantage Mike Elko. I think when you're sitting in meetings and you're thinking about the dynamic between a head coach and a quarterback, the quarterback at 20 years old is probably not asking the coach, "Hey, coach, what really bothers you? What are the things that bother your defense?" I think that the conversation looks the other way, and he's trying to find out, "Hey, what are you comfortable in? What are you uncomfortable in? And how can we game plan around that?" So I just think that it's a big ask for Notre Dame's line in a really tough environment. We're accustomed to seeing them beating up on ACC teams. Against the SEC, it's been somewhat of a different story. At 3, in what I think should be a pretty low-scoring game, I mean, I think this is one that has potential to be really low-scoring. The under got bet down a good bit, which I regret not taking.
Me too.
But I think that under 3, or if you just want action at 3 and you're not as concerned about the number, which I'm not advocating for, it would be Texas A&M for me, or an under, or maybe even a Notre Dame team total under, perhaps.
That's where I was going, because I'm seeing, as we're doing this, 21.5 for Notre Dame. That's the way to really get at the handicap of, hey, I think Notre Dame's going to struggle. They're going to struggle up front. That 21.5 is a key number. Paying a little extra juice at -125, -130, or shop around, maybe get a better number. But I think and I could see like a 24-21 final, that kind of game. And, that's one where you're really isolating your handicap and hey, Notre Dame's gonna have a hard time moving the ball. That's how I attack it. And then you're not really, you're not regretting that you're missing out on the best number because that's how you're playing it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Would you in turn, if you like A&M in this game, would you make a case for A&M to make the playoffs? Because hey, right off the bat, marquee win, Notre Dame. It's a nice feather in their cap. They're like 2.5 to 1. Would you advocate that bet?
I think there's too much quality in the SEC this year, and
Okay.
I would still have them just a little bit down the pecking order. I actually took Ole Miss to make the playoff. I think schedule wise, I kind
I
of
agree.
mentioned I think they're a much stronger trench team this year. A lot of the skill pieces and the schedule is really favorable for them. I think Texas A&M has a little bit tougher road to hoe. And I just don't think they're quite as good a team in year one. I do think that their days of underperforming consistently are probably past them, but I just don't know that they're quite there yet. Though I do think this, especially because I think Notre Dame has the potential to really finish the season strong and maybe even lose this game and still make it.
Yeah.
I think that things set up for that. So if you're buying Notre Dame or you like some of what you see, maybe even a make the playoff after this game with a loss, you get a little bump in price.
Anything else you like here Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday, another ACC SEC game. Laying 13 with Virginia Tech on the road at Vanderbilt is one that I liked. Virginia Tech is very much an arrow up team for me. I think that they are top 5 in returning production. I think they returned 21 starters. You isolate their last 4 games of the season when they really got the quarterback situation sorted out with Kyron Drones and kind of built an offense around him. And they were really tough out. They were scoring about 40 points a game. And I think with Vanderbilt, that's something that they consistently did. You know, they lost 9 of the 12 games last year by 14 or more. So this isn't something that would be too abnormal for them. They kind of annexed New Mexico State, both at the coaching level and a personnel level. I think that's a dangerous game to play in the SEC and against a very, very high quality ACC team. I just think if all remains status quo from last year, this is a game where Virginia Tech could get after them pretty good. And I just don't necessarily trust Pavia to, kind of play some of his hero ball and for that to work against a secondary that has a couple of NFL guys playing for him.
All right. Anything else that you like in terms of Saturday, or you want to just run through anything else you're thinking about betting here?
Yeah, I'll be real quick. A couple other totals. Old Dominion, South Carolina over 52.5. That's another game where I think South Carolina has major potential to hang a big number. They've had real serious offensive line issues last year, couldn't run the ball at all. They've now got a legit dual threat quarterback in Lenore Sellers, who I think they're really going to want to get him off to a good start. That's something where you have seen Beamer hasn't really had the potential to score a ton of points just because of the way the matchups have gone. But when they had an opportunity to score last year in 3 games, they were scoring 40, 45 points a game when they had the opportunity. So at 52.5, you're not really asking much for Old Dominion. And I think Old Dominion's the type of team where you don't know how they do it, but they're just plucky enough where I'm like, should I lay the 20.5? And I'm like, no, don't lay the 20.5. They'll find a way to keep it close. And I think if they find a way to keep it closer than what we expect, it's going to be in a high scoring affair. 2 other quick ones, or one other for Saturday. Southern Miss Kentucky over 50.5. This is kind of a pace play for me. Kentucky has talked about they want to increase the tempo this year. They've got a new offensive coordinator in. They've got a 5-star transfer quarterback. They've had talent at wide receiver. They haven't necessarily hit on several of their portal quarterbacks recently. But I think if we do see an increase in tempo from them, this was a Southern Miss defense that was really bad last year. They've got a couple options at quarterback. Again, probably not asking them to do a whole lot of scoring, but if they can contribute there and we do get the uptick in pace, I think the number's a little bit light.
Do you have a sleeper team? Either make the playoffs. I mean, it's such a chalk sport, right? I don't think most people agree it's Georgia or Ohio State. And if you want to get really, outside the box, maybe Oregon. But do you have a sleeper to either make the playoffs or just be better than most people think?
I mean, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Sorry to double dip, but I think Virginia Tech is that team for me.
Okay.
I think that, especially that Florida State loss, I think that actually bodes really well for them. Just because if they got into a tiebreaker scenario, without getting too into the weeds on it, things break well for them from that standpoint. So that actually was a really good loss for them. I think they're going to be favored in 10 games, and I think they're going to be one score or less underdogs at Miami and at home against Clemson, two winnable games. So I'm not sure exactly what their price is. I focus more on them in the ACC. I think I've got a 10-1 and an 18-1 and a regular season win over. Even took 100-1 on their quarterback Drones for the Heisman. Took a flyer on that one.
That was my next question. My final question. Anything else for Heisman?
I don't really mess with the Heisman market too much. I will
Odds
say
aren't as good as they used to be, right?
yeah, and I mean, I had a string of years where I had Lamar's at a similar price to what Drones is now, and you know, had a few there for a few years that were really good, but I actually missed out on the big Burrow numbers and all of that. It's just not a market that I really have focused on too much. I kind of isolate more and look for some season long player props and, you know, more even money versus taking big long shots.
Yeah, it's I just think there's so many more eyes on this stuff now, and there's so many more betting shows and betting content. And same thing. I don't know if you follow NFL MVP, but like NFL MVPs, this was the same way where Mahomes and Lamar, their first year as starters, they won like 70-1, 80-1. You know, you mentioned Burrow won it like 200-1. There's just too many eyes on this stuff where they're just the books are not. They know it's probably gonna be a quarterback, and they've just gotten smarter pricing. I feel like.
Yeah, I think so. I think you probably have to identify the team, the quarterback of the team that can win 9 or 10 games, surprise some people. They've got a logo that means something. And for me, again, it's 100-1, so I'm not going to sit here with a straight face and say, "Hey, this is the guy everyone's got to take him."
Right.
But you know, a guy that could conceivably rush for 100 yards a game and throw for 225, 250 on a 10-2 team, that'll get some attention.
All right, man. Well, you did a hell of a job. I appreciate you coming on. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, so on Twitter at FranchiseKF, pretty active during falls, pretty dormant throughout most of the year. College football is really sort of my only thing. And I write weekly previews. I have a website that I run myself, brandonchicken.com, where I do some longer form write-ups on every SEC and ACC game from a weekly standpoint. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, I appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on. Hopefully we'll do this again during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that will do it. Thank you to Franchise KF. We will actually be off Monday for the holiday, but be back on Wednesday. And when we're back, it is time for the NFL. We'll break down college, baseball. So busy time of the year, exciting time of the year. And it will be, I believe Wednesday is the 100th episode. So doing a little giveaway, rate, review, subscribe. If you leave a review on Apple, just leave like your name or your Twitter handle, and we will be doing a giveaway, $100. Probably pick 2 winners to do the giveaway. So leave a review on Apple. And other than that, see you Wednesday. Enjoy the holiday. Talk to you then.